to the May 22nd, 2025 meeting of the Bellingham Planning Board. I'd like to ask Nick for the last time to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. We are continuing with the public hearing for 180 Payne Street. We received a lot of information from the public at the last meeting, also some additional phone calls. I'd like to hand it over to Rob to provide an overview of what the actions have taken place in a PowerPoint presentation. In advance, I apologize. In order for us to view the presentation, for a moment, we have to turn our backs to you. And for that, I apologize. Rob, I'll turn the floor to you.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So good evening, everybody. So as I'm sure most people are aware, there was a lot of comments, questions, and concerns that were mentioned at the last meeting. And we really wanted to catalog those to make sure that, we're not going to keep rehashing the same stuff, and that really this is what the applicant is going to have to look at to address these concerns. So what I've done is, just to try and make this as simple as possible, I did prepare a PowerPoint presentation with really the key items that were mentioned, and I broke this up into different categories through traffic, stormwater, utilities, and general comments. So just to kind of go over a lot of the items that we discussed last meeting, I just wanted to go over these points. So for traffic concerns along Rentham Road, the items that were mentioned, there is definitely concern about increased traffic generated in that area. There were comments mentioned about the culvert that's in disrepair and currently is already disrupting traffic. Only one lane is open on that culvert. So how is this development going to affect that culvert that's already disrupting traffic flow? There was also a request for clarification regarding traffic counts and also the impacts to abutting intersections. This includes routes in Rentham, not just in Bellingham. The proposed interior driveway is rather steep. It looks like the grades are over 8%, so that was something else that was mentioned. We also want clarification on the potential traffic hindrance on Rentham Road due to any type of utility impacts if they need to be upgraded for the development. And lastly, as I mentioned, there will need to be a third-party peer review on all of the studies. The next slide, so this is the traffic concerns on Payne Street. So similar to Rentham Road, there's obviously concern with the increased traffic volumes generated on that street. There's already concerns regarding the existing conditions of intersections within proximity to this development. Most notably is the Crooks Corner intersection, but also the intersection at Rentham Road. So the clarification on any decrease in level of service for those intersections need to be looked at. There's also current high amounts of queuing that occur because of the Crooks Corner intersection that do back up to where this site entrance is being proposed. So another item that needs to be addressed. The access and egress for the residents on Payne Street, that has been a noted concern for the abutters. Payne Street is not exactly the most easily navigable road. Anyway, so that is something that needs to also be looked at. The current conditions of Payne Street, we all know that the grades and alignment are rather tricky as of right now, so any increase in traffic on Payne Street will need to be looked at. There's also the blind corner at the top of Payne Street that may affect the safety at that proposed signalized intersection. where the entrance is going to go on Payne Street. And continued for traffic concerns on Payne Street, there are sight distance issues at the existing New England Country Club entrance. There's elevation concerns at the proposed signalized intersection. It's not flat over there, and most intersections are flat when you have a signalized intersection. It's level. Another concern was pedestrian safety for the Payne Street residents, and obviously the increase in traffic could affect that. And once again, there needs to be a peer review for any traffic-related concerns, or I should say a peer review for any traffic-related analyses. One thing to note, on the website, the electronic copy of the traffic impact analysis initially was just the appendices. When looking at this with coordinating with the peer review consultant, I did not realize that the entire electronic copy was not on our website. So that has since been addressed. I think that was updated end of last week, but the entire traffic impact analysis, not just the appendices, are now on the website, just to note. Because I know a few people did call the office and were questioning why there was no summary or really any dialogue in that report. It was mostly just counts. So that full report is now on our website, just to note. Continuing. So utility concerns, I guess there really needs to be just overall clarification on the utility impacts. And what improvements are required to accommodate the development. That includes both utility improvements, but also improvements along any roadway that might be affected by utility installation. There is a current issue with the South Bellingham drinking water well field, which is something that the DPW has since raised. There is some work that's going to be done. I believe there's money that's being allocated at this town meeting to work on a feasibility study for the wells. That's something that could affect this project, so something that the applicant can be aware of. Also, regarding fire suppression, can the infrastructure support those water flows? The other question regarding Bellingham being able to accommodate the required water and sewer demand. There's also the question regarding water or sewer connections directly to Woonsocket. That was another item that was mentioned. And then just lastly, again, there is 2 consultants that the DPW works with, one for sewer and one for water, and they will be, at the applicant's expense, working on any modeling and looking at the current infrastructure to basically look at the demand and see what needs to be done to accommodate the development. Moving on to stormwater. So there were concerns about the on-site wetlands and how stormwater runoff may affect those. In particular, the access road along Payne Street is directly adjacent to a jurisdictional wetland. So that was mentioned. That's at the base of Payne Street. There was concerns about off-site flooding of abutting parcels that are down gradient. As you know, the site is a hill that pretty much pitches towards Rentham Road. So that was mentioned. There was statements regarding poor soils and ledge, which can always affect the stormwater design, so that's going to have to be meshed out. There appears to be some off-site stormwater runoff that contributes to the site that comes from Bound Road, so that also needs to be accounted for in the stormwater design. Bungay Brook, which is located at the base of the hill along Rentham Road, is a flood zone AE, down gradient of the parcel, and it floods regularly, so that's another concern that needs to be addressed. The stormwater basin along the Rentham Road entrance appears to be discharging, or appears to design to discharge water directly onto the right-of-way, which is problematic. So that's another item. And lastly, again, there will need to be a peer review for the stormwater design as we move forward. And now we're getting into my last topic, which is the general concerns. So for the general concerns, and mind you, these, I did not list these in order of more things being more important than the other. It's just based on my notes. So moving on for the general comments, obviously the density was mentioned during the last public hearing as being not exactly in line with the 2017 zone change. There were also concerns regarding the 5-story garden-style apartment buildings. Once again, not exactly what was discussed during the 2017 zone change. The requirement regarding the 55-plus age restriction was a major concern that needs to be addressed as well, as far as how is that going to be enforced. And that kind of leaks into the next concern regarding currently, it sounds like these are being proposed as rentals and not owner-occupied, and that also leads to concerns with the 55-plus enforcement. The eastern portion of the site appears to contain land with potential historic protection due to presence of Native American artifacts features. The lack of buffer between what we're calling the eastern development and the Gloud Lane neighborhood. There was also concerns regarding impacts to public safety with this type of density and type of development, and also the one point of access and egress on the eastern development. I think this is the last slide. There's the significant increase in Bellingham population if this is fully constructed, another major concern. Going back to the 55-plus enforcement, there's the concern for the potential impact to Bellingham school system if the age restriction is not enforced. It was also noted that we would like to see New England Country Club remain in operation and open to the public. Light pollution and noise impacts also were mentioned, particularly along the Gloud Lane and Payne Street residences, since those are directly abutting the development. The potential for low-income housing if restrictions are not followed. And one of the comments, too, there was a comment regarding the land trust that abuts the parcel along the Rentham property line. I don't believe that there's a land trust on the land. I think that's just the abutting parcel, but for whoever mentioned that, if you're here tonight, happy to discuss further. I think, we do have GIS access and be interested to see if there's something wonky going on with the records, but that was another concern. Now, with that, just a couple items to note. I know there was a lot of questions, comments, and concerns regarding what happened in 2017 with the zone change and where we are now with this development. So one thing to note, I know there was some concern or questions or confusion, I should say, about what was approved back in 2017 and what we're looking at now. And just to be clear, so the 2017 item was a zone change that went in front of town meeting. There was a concept that was discussed by, at the time it was Bond v. Holmes. That concept was not approved. What would have to happen is Bond v. would have to come back in front of the planning board for a special permit, similar to this process, to go through the actual approval process to build that. So the zone change just allowed the permitting procedure for a development such as what Bond v. was presenting or what the current applicant is presenting. Now, with that, quite a few people have reached out to the office asking specific questions about the 2017 zone change. And first of all, I really appreciate people reaching out. I know there's been a lot of really good, meaningful conversations. and some clarifications. But I want to let everybody know that, so I did dig through our records, and I did find items related to the 2017 zone change. So for clarity, what I would like to do after tonight, so tomorrow at some point, we would like to add on our website, on the left-hand side where there's the proposed projects tab, we're going to add another tab that has the 2017 zone change information. And with that, there's going to be the article, the actual language that was, well, it's in our zoning bylaws now, but we'll pull that out. We will also include that concept that Bonvi was discussing, just so it's clear. And then the other item too is there was a regulatory, a development agreement. So I don't want to get into too much detail because I would rather that be on our website, and if people have specific questions or comments, we can discuss it at a later date. But we want to make sure that that information, I know people were asking about it, and I was able to find this information, so we want to make sure that everybody has access to it. Now, with that, I think that sums up everything that I had at this point, Mr. Chair.
I believe it does. At this point, I'd like to turn it over, excuse me. I'd like to turn it over to the applicant. If they have any additional information they want to present to us since the last meeting.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members of the board, and Mr. Lucier, and our team's getting the presentation up on the screen, which will be a short presentation. But first and foremost, I want to thank all of the members of the public for all of your engagement over the past several months at the various meetings we've had, and I appreciate everyone being here tonight, particularly given the rain outside. And Representative Soter, thank you for joining this evening. We appreciate it. As Rob laid out, there were a lot of concerns and questions that were raised over the course of the month of March, and we really appreciate all of those questions. And I think, as Rob and members of town staff can attest, since that meeting, we have been working very diligently to address many of those issues and concerns and understand them better, endeavor to mitigate them, and make progress. And so what we'll show you tonight is meant to incorporate many of those concerns. As Rob alluded to, given the length of the list that Rob just went through, we are continuing to work on these items and these issues. So we certainly do not have all of the answers this evening, but what we'd like to do is share progress to date, continue to get incremental feedback and guidance from all the stakeholders and all of the members of the public, and continue working on. There certainly will be more meetings regarding this, and in particular, I don't want to kind of speak out of turn, but I know going forward, we are going to hold subject matter specific meetings. For instance, the next meeting we will hold is a traffic specific meeting sometime in the month of June to address the granularities of all of the different traffic concerns and traffic dynamics. And we heard that one, that there was a particular concern around traffic. So again, we are here to listen. Nothing we are presenting tonight is final, but we hope that it is moving in a direction that is well aligned with the concerns that were raised over the course of February and March. And we look forward to continuing to work with everybody in this room and all of the broader stakeholders in a spirit of partnership. So Mike, if you don't mind going to, just to, as a reminder to frame everyone's perspective, so this is the New England Country Club, which is approximately 340 acres. Here we're looking at it from west to east. And Mike, if you want to, so as Rob was alluding to, this is a summary of the proposal that we proposed last time, which was 1,600 units. 800 units on the western side and 800 units on the eastern side, and how it comports to the active adult overlay that was passed in 2017. From a density standpoint, the overlay allows for 8 units per acre, and we had proposed 4.8 units. In terms of maximum building height, it was 60 feet, and we were below 60 feet with all of our structures. In terms of open space, minimum 50% of the site, and we've managed to retain 86.5% of the site as open space. And in terms of separation between buildings, to make sure that it's properly spaced, the zoning requires 20 feet between buildings, and we are at 88 feet between buildings. So even though this, and Mike, if you want to go to the next slide, even though what we presented and submitted in February, which is what's on the screen now, even though that it was fully compliant with the zoning, we did hear and listen to a lot of the feedback that we have received, and accordingly, we have made a number of changes, both in terms of units, density, architecture, height of buildings, design of buildings, and a number of other items, which we will touch on at a high level tonight. Mike, if you want to... So the plan that was just on the page a moment ago showed 800 units on the left-hand side off of Payne Road and 800 units on the right-hand side off of Rentham Road. Particularly given a lot of the feedback we received from various stakeholders on the eastern side of the parcel, we have reduced the number of units there by 350 units. And we have moved 150 of those units to the west side. But overall, the project has been reduced from 1,600 units to 1,400 units, so a reduction of 200 units. Other items that are reflected in this plan are we have met with a one-on-one directly with a number of direct abutters. And we are continuing to work with, we're continuing to set up meetings with direct abutters. We have been in people's backyards to understand view corridors, adjacencies, buffer zones. And again, we welcome anybody to reach out to us, and we want to be respectful and would never comment on anyone's property uninvited. But it's been very productive to date with various abutters on Globe Lane, Rentham Road, and Payne Street. So we look forward, and please feel free to reach out. Additionally, with regards to the eastern parcel, there were concerns about the proximity to Globe Lane, and accordingly, as you can, we reduced that entire outline, footprint there from 800 units to 450 units, and moved it back substantially. So there's now 300 feet between the property line and the first building. And that buffer will be retained in its current condition as full forested woodlands. And so from Globe Lane, you will not be able to see the buildings that are on the interior of the site. Mike, the other comment that we heard kind of loud and clear, and again, despite the fact that the zoning may say one thing, we heard that folks were keen on a little bit more of a townhouse style expression of the housing units. And so what we did was we went back and we really tried to break down the different residential buildings into smaller buildings, kind of broken off buildings, varying heights buildings, and to really make sure that it feels more like a kind of New England residential context. We have some initial images to share tonight on that. I can tell you that continues to be ongoing. The design process is very iterative, so we hope that what we're showing tonight is in the right direction and is responsive to the comments that we heard, but we certainly have more work to do, and we certainly welcome more feedback. So this is, one of the typologies that we have advanced. Mike, if you want to advance the next. This is another typology. If we go to the next slide. This, something really, they're essentially vertical townhouses and duplexes with direct entries, on and off, right at the ground level, with landscaping and forecourts and gardens out front. This is something that we certainly are continuing to detail. As you can tell, there's not quite the level of detail and ornamentation in terms of design of the balconies and railings and those type of kind of, specific details. But in terms of how the site and the residential units will live and breathe, we thought that this was a way to really kind of make it feel more permeable and, as residential as possible. And then this next image as well shows what, a comment we had heard was concerns over kind of monolithic buildings. And so we've really tried to break down the massing of the buildings, vary the heights, and also make them, really, again, what we kind of would all consider your more traditional, quintessential New England style colonial design. I know we heard some comments at our last meeting that some of the design was far too contemporary. So again, we have more work to do, but this is something that we hope and we believe feels a little bit more properly scaled. Some of the other concerns that we heard was what would these buildings look like from the street and how would it change the existing conditions? And as we have redesigned the buildings themselves with varying heights, different layouts, deeper setbacks, and more perspective from some direct abutters that were nice enough to invite us onto their property, we have managed to redesign the property in a way that you really will not be able to see anything from the existing conditions. So this vantage point is on Payne Street. And on the left is the view today, and on the right is what the view would look like once the project was built. And so, as you can tell, we are really endeavoring to keep the full tree buffer, and so that the conditions on Payne Street, both for existing residents there, as well as just the broader public driving by, really there would be no change. On Wrentham Road, this is kind of farther up on the northeastern portion of the site. As you can see, the red dot up in the right corner. And this shows on the left a vantage point today, and on the right a vantage point once fully constructed. And again, we kind of have carefully redesigned some of the elements to make sure that they are fully buffered by existing conditions today. And then this is on Wrentham Road as well, but a little bit more in the middle part of the site, which shows again existing conditions today, and then the fully constructed conditions with really no change. And Mike, I think we can flip. That's right. Other comments that we heard and that we are working on are lighting concerns, and certainly both where we're certainly going to comply with the statutory dark sky requirements, but we're trying to go a step further as well and really try to minimize the lumens and the lighting impacts, including things such as really kind of asymmetric lights, which first of all, they'll be low and they'll be downcast, but really only having them light the road or the walkway that needs to be lit and kind of have the backside of that be opaque, where there's no light needed. So instead of having a full circular radius of light, it would really just be a specifically targeted diameter. So anyways, there's many kind of dynamics at the broader macro level that you are here to hear more about tonight, and that we are continuing to incorporate. And certainly there's many more details in terms of things like lighting plans, road plans, stormwater plans that we're working in. And as Rob alluded to, we are actively working with various discipline experts, both on our team as well as on town staff and the town's peer reviewers, which many of those peer reviews have kicked off and will continue over the coming months. So I will pause there. We're certainly here to answer any and all questions. And again, we view this as the next inning of the discussion, but by no means are we anywhere near the ninth inning of the discussion. So thanks again to everybody for coming this evening. And we'll be here now and in the future. So thank you.
Rob, anything you want to add?
So this is the first time I see this plan. Can you, just one clarification, can you go back to the slide that has the new layout?
Yes.
All right, so that's the new layout. Now, can you go to the rendering from Payne Street? I think you are missing a building. There, where my red dot is, right, with the new layout?
Rob, would be happy to follow up with all of kind of the detailed background. We had kind of grayed out the addresses and stuff here for privacy purposes of some of these shots, but you know, we took these in the field and overlaid them, you know, with precision. But if you feel the orientation is off, we certainly you know, we certainly can meet with you and correct that or compare notes.
Yeah, I just think that you're proposing a building that's closer than. Is this the previous layout or is this the proposed layout?
That's the previous.
Okay. Well, I think that answers my question then.
Before I turn it over to the public, I'd like to hear from the board members. Steve?
I've got a few notes here, but before I address them, a couple quick questions. So you've reduced the eastern density, so you've shifted some of that to the western side?
That's correct. So we reduced it by 350 units over on the east. We moved 150 to the west, and we eliminated 200 altogether.
So you're looking at 950 now on the west?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, hang on.
Hold on,
Hang on.
please.
And how many stories are we looking at for the buildings on the west side?
They range between everything from 1-story, 2-story, 3-story, 4-story, 5-story. So
Okay.
that's one of the things we've done is try to spread it out a little bit by different building heights and typologies.
Okay. All right, so I'll get into my comments now then. First, I know we're going to be addressing the specific aspects of all of this in the future, so I'm not going to comment on each and every one of them until we go through them. We have some information and I can ask questions and give comments intelligently rather than just speculating right now. But I do want to comment on an overview of this because what I'm going to comment on now isn't going to change. And I think this is what's caused the reaction that we're getting now. First, I want to say that as this project sits, it's a city project. If you looked at this project in Melrose or Everett, you know, you wouldn't give it a second look. But this is in Bellingham. And when you look at this, it's clearly, when you look at the surroundings, it's a square peg in a round hole. So that's the first thing I want to say. And I'm pretty certain that the residents, you know, feel as though they don't want to see Bellingham over time turn into a city. And 950 units sitting off of Payne Street, you know, is a huge change from what they've experienced, and I question whether or not our resources and our infrastructure is even prepared for it, but I know we're going to address that down the road. And the project, as it sits today, is the largest residential project ever introduced in Bellingham's history. So, you know, all of these things that I just mentioned is why we have that list of concerns that that Rob just went through. And I'm not going to talk about traffic, but I will say that this project off of Payne Street is probably one of the worst streets that you can introduce a project like this on. When you look at when you look at the intersections and the Woonsocket end, and then on the Bellingham side, along with the grade of the street, the corners that it takes, the sight distances, it's just, and then 950 units exiting onto it, it just, that's a huge concern to me. And then there was also a discussion about the need to put a light on Payne Street. I think that's a terrible idea. Given the sight distances and the stopping distances for large trucks, and then to put a light right on Payne Street, the whole thing is a major concern to me.
One big accident.
So,
Excuse me.
I'll just finish, you know, by saying this. In addition, over 55, which is what this is intended to be. I'm part of the over 55 club. There's two things that I would look at if I was moving into an over 55 community. First one is parking in front of my front door, which I think very few parking spaces will accommodate that, given the nature of what you're looking at here. And secondly is single-story living. And although the apartment's a single story, if you've got, apartments that are, 3, 4, 5 stories tall, I can't imagine someone over 55 wanting to park in a parking lot, walk across, a parking lot, get in an elevator, and then down a hallway to where they live. So the whole over 55 look of this doesn't even appear to me to be welcoming for an over 55 group. So those are my overview comments for now, and I'm sure we'll get into it, further. And I appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Phil?
So I'm happy this is going down. Looks like the rough calculation's about 12.5%.
You might want to hold the mic close to your mouth, Phil.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The 12.5% I don't think takes care of the concerns that I had last time. Last time I went on for about 9 minutes worth of concerns, and 12.5% reduction. It's a reduction, but I don't think that does it. I like the fact you moved things more inside the perimeter. But I thought it was kind of, let me say it this way. You showed some nice pictures with trees that were fully leafed. What would it be during the other 6 months of the year? How much would you be able to see with no leaves out there? Because I think you're going to see a whole lot of difference. So to me, I think it's a red flag. Okay, I'll just say it that way. One of your earlier slides said the number of buildings, and it matched the same amount. 8 and 8, I think you said, from the original time the bylaw changed to right now. Well, I got to say that may be technically true, but it's not the spirit of what's going on here. The spirit of what's going on here is you're increasing dramatically from last time. So when this thing got approved. That 12.5% doesn't alleviate my concerns on the public resources, the fire, the schools, the water, the sewers. I mentioned the override the last time. We had two, the school override and also for the paramedics. I think that definitely we still have issues there. The next question I have is for Rob. And Rob, this plan was not presented. We didn't receive this in the office before last Thursday, right?
Correct.
All right. So Bellingham has rules that say that you can't present something to the town in a town meeting unless you present it and get it into the town offices by Thursday at noontime?
Yeah, so just for clarity, Phil, we can have them present. The issue, though, is that, obviously we're very early in the process here, so, you wouldn't act on it, but you don't want...
The spirit of the law, the spirit of it is basically the procedures in place so that the board can review it ahead of time and actually come up with the questions other than just sitting here and seeing it for the first time. So I would ask that any presentations that you're going to give are provided to the town offices by noontime Thursday before the meeting, so that not only can the board see it, but I think it's fair for them to be posted so that in case the residents have questions.
Absolutely. We certainly can do that going forward.
So that's in our procedural rules, and I'd like to follow those going forward. So I think I'm going to stop there. But like I said, I think we got to take a look at the approval criteria very closely, and I'm going to just leave it at that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Liz?
Thank you. So I just had a quick question about some of the photos you had taken. So you're saying the view won't change from what it currently is to today. For the buildings that are 5 stories, those won't peek over the trees in some of those photos that you took, or?
That's correct.
Okay, so they'll be all under the trees that are currently existing?
Yes, either they're under the trees, kind of eye to eye, or they are far enough set, but, we've now set them far enough back that, one could never kind of, even if the tree is technically shorter than the building, you kind of can't get that viewpoint.
Okay. Thank you. That clarifies that question. I think, I could reiterate what my fellow board members have said here. I think obviously, you've seen Rob's PowerPoint with the 30, issues and concerns that we've brought up, the public's brought up, so I won't really belabor that, but I do want to kind of add on to Steve's comment about this being the largest project Bellingham has ever seen. I think it's one of the largest projects I've ever seen in Eastern Massachusetts, so it is a very large project. It has high density. So I think that is something that will continue to be a sticking point for the board, for the public, and, for town officials. So, my comments about traffic and all those other things will come as we have those subject matter meetings, because those are a lot of information, a lot of dense information. So I'll save the rest of my commentary for as we move through the process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation tonight. I'm most interested in hearing from the residents that attended the first meeting, and of course, residents that are attending meeting for this application for the first time that have brought new concerns. A couple notes that I have. I traveled on Payne Street today, probably about a half a dozen times in what I would call less than ideal conditions, and driving on Payne Street, it was hard to envision your project not making the conditions worse. After the first meeting, density was absolutely a concern. Although you're moving in the right direction, density is still a concern. We appreciate you moving in the right direction, but I think we're going to be looking for a little bit more in the future. And then, Mr. Flynn, you made an interesting comment. I understand where you're coming from as far as the aesthetics go, that you're pursuing a New England colonial type feel. But as Mr. Goyette said, I will remind you, you are in Bellingham, and a 5-story building will never have a New England colonial feel to it. So I appreciate the intentions, but we're going to have to work on that.
Thank you.
Before I go to my comments, I have a question for you. Did I remember right? You're working in Everett, Quincy, Boston, what other towns? Cities, excuse me.
Various towns and cities around the state.
When was the last time you were at the Quincy project?
I'm sorry.
The last time you were at the Quincy project?
We're at all of our projects every week.
Okay. We're not any of those towns.
We understand.
We're a small community.
Yep.
Okay? We're close-knit, and this is going to dramatically impact the population in Bellingham. I think the density, although you've made a few steps, we have a long way to go. I travel on Payne Street often. The idea of lights in the bottom with the blind curves, the steepness, the curves, the speed, it's not a good idea. I know you've moved some units around, but you still have a lot of 5-story buildings. I'm going to be very honest. We're not a town, we're a colonial town. 5-story, as other people have said, 5-story buildings don't blend in to what Bellingham is. And I want to emphasize what I said last time, and I just said it a moment ago. We're not Quincy, we're not Everett. We're a special small town that likes being small, and I don't think people in this town are looking forward to adding what is now a roughly 1,400 unit development that still has a lot of questions. In regards to my specific comments, everything that was outlined by Rob on that PowerPoint, I have concerns about. So I think we have a long way to go. And that will be my last comment. What I'd like to do is turn it over to the public. Rob, is there anyone you want to introduce tonight? I'm going to ask for questions. If the same question's been asked 2 or 3 times, we'll take a count of hands to see how many people agree. I know you want to express your opinion and your comments and your statements. I appreciate that. But I would ask that you get to the question quickly if you're making a statement, and we're going to ask that you rotate the people asking questions. So Representative Soder, I know you have a tight schedule.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have some questions for the developer, and after I left the first meeting and reviewing the 2017 project, which at the time when that project was starting, I was sitting on the board, the select board. Is this on? Yeah. Can you hear me now? I don't want to break it, because I'll own it.
Yeah.
I can give you a handheld. Hold on.
Yeah, I don't mind taking this off, but I don't want to screw it up.
Don't touch the lapel mic. Don't touch it. There you go. Yeah.
So my first question is, in 2020, I went back to look at my office notes too, because as state rep last year, I got a call from the chairman of the Board of Selectmen last January in regards to this project, not this particular project, but inquiring about MBTA zoning. Did you have a conversation with the select board about MBTA zoning for this particular property?
We never had any conversation with
So
the
you
select board.
never had a
MBTA.
conversation about going in front of that committee for MBTA zoning when they were looking to rezone their MBTA zoning?
We did not.
You did not, at all?
I don't, yes, unless
Okay.
there's something I'm unaware of.
Sure. Positive?
To the best of my knowledge, we have never considered this part of the MBTA.
Because-
I don't even think it would qualify
Yes,
because of the
you know
55
it.
plus.
You know it would, because the 55 plus is not going to make a difference, because I did call the state about that particular issue, because there's a difference between deeded 55 and actually 55 owner occupied. So you mentioned in the last meeting it was deeded over 55. Deeded over 55 means that if I'm 55 and John, who is my assistant here with me, who happens to be 24, I can sign the lease as over 55 and he can still be living there. So the problem is there is no restriction on the fact that you can make this an over 55 gated community without any really kind of owner occupied situation. The reason the overlay was, what bothers me about this whole thing is that when we did the overlay for this project, we went from north to south, every aspect of this town. We went above and beyond, not just the legal abutters of the original project. We went beyond that. We told the developer we went beyond that. And I will tell you, as the chairman of the Board of Selectmen then, I met with Pulte, who proposed the same damn project before that, and we said, absolutely not going to happen. So the whole over 55 gated community, owner occupied, was the only thing that this town approved through a town meeting vote, had multiple public hearings before that article was drafted and voted on, had more press, more involvement. We didn't even fill, after we filled one big meeting, we didn't have auditoriums. I've never seen an auditorium planning board meeting since I've been involved in Bellingham. This is a problem. And I've told you that and I guess my next question is going to be, have you had any other conversations with anybody else on the Board of Selectmen about this project as a friendly 40B, building an affordable housing unit in another side of town?
We have never, at any point in the past 3 years, considered this for 40B or for MBTA communities.
Good, because the reason I'm asking that is that there was a public statement made the other day about affordable housing on Center Street that's going to be built and proposed. So a light bulb went off in my head to go and look and call housing to see what applications were in, because I would know that if that was there. And two, it would be there if two things happened. The planning board had a project in front of them, and the Board of Selectmen wanted to do a friendly 40B, now which they don't have to do 40B, they've met their maximum, but they still could do a 40B if they wanted to. It doesn't mean that they have to stop doing it, but it means they don't have to use it as a requirement to give somebody the permission to build a project, say like this. So my concern is there is no application, so I'm glad that never happened, because there seems to be a statement that's made that there's affordable housing that's going to be built right away. That isn't true, so that's good. I was afraid that when I heard that, there was some sort of agreement where you were going to build affordable housing to solve a need for this project to be approved. And there would be some friendly 40B, because I think the public should know that when a friendly 40B is approved by the Board of Selectmen, they kind of lose control over projects. Okay? They lose control over projects because it means that the town wants that. We have two apartment complexes that back in November, the town approved through town meeting vote to have overlays on for MBTA, which satisfies our MBTA requirements. Even those aren't 5 floors. They're 3 floors. They're 250, right, Rob? 250 at the Curtis. What is it? 220 at the Charles?
Got it. The Charles is 350 units, and that one is 4 stories, I believe.
4 stories.
And then the Curtis is 250 units.
Right,
So
but if I remember,
500
the Curtis was a friendly 40B.
Correct.
Okay, so you guys kind of had your hands tied because it was a friendly 40B and you were using it to meet your requirements required by the state.
So just for clarity, the 40B process, that is not even handled by the planning board, that is a zoning board of appeals application.
Right. So I guess my concern is this type of project in this location, and when the chairman at the time called me about this particular location having inquiries on MBTA zoning, I obviously made my voice very loud and clear at that point, was that this should never have been even considered for MBTA. One, it's far enough away from the MBTA. Two, the traffic on Payne Street and the handling of that. And that we passed this overwhelmingly, an overlay that I think was the fastest overlay that I ever seen passed in a town that has a very boisterous opinion about development I've ever seen, because they did what they wanted, the public wanted to do. And that overlay, yes, Rob is right, didn't have a development plan, didn't have it, but it was developed in a way that it had input from the developer, Bonvie at the time, to show diagrams of what these people wanted. They don't want this. And I don't know what else is going to get through your mind that they don't want this. And I tell you, there's going to be every obstacle, and I'm going to keep looking. I'm looking at every obstacle to throw in your way from a state level, because I am not going to sit here and allow this monstrosity to keep moving forward just because you want to take 5 apartments here, 10 apartments here. It just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. You know, when I know a lot of the folks. I'm sorry on the Woonsocket side. I'm just starting to get to know you. Maybe when I run for president, that will make a difference. But reality is, a lot of these people in Bellingham I've got to know over the years, and a lot of them I got to know because of this project. And they were okay with it. And some people, we went as far as the Cape to look at condos and look at the development that was there. Look at. People go in and out of business all the time. I get that. Unfortunately, 2022, Ron Bonvie was going out of business or whatever was happening. Who knows? I don't know what happened to him. I just feel like if that was happening, the overlay should have been taken away so that you wouldn't even have the opportunity to present this. And that was never done. And that's concerning. I apologize to you guys. I'm not on the Board of Selectmen in 2022, so I couldn't do anything about it. But that should have happened, and it didn't. But that overlay is very clear, and it lays out a roadmap for you to try to figure out how to make that overlay work with condos and selling it that way and making these people feel comfortable what you're doing. The more you keep doing this and keep coming back with the same old thing, taking an apartment here or taking an apartment there, you're not going to earn any of their trust if you end up doing any kind of project. They're never going to trust it. My strongest suggestion to you is get that overlay, figure out how to build those condos. It had every aspect of what everybody had input on, and that is how that overlay was designed. It wasn't just something that they got one day in the mail and said, hey, show up because 1,600 apartments are going to be built in your backyard. I don't get it. I don't understand it. There's a roadmap here. Build it to that, because I'll tell you, you're not going to, this is going to be, it's just a way to get around affordable housing. You're talking, you said the last time, $4,000 a month. I don't know, I've talked to a lot of seniors over the past month and a half. I don't see any of them going there for $4,000 a month. So I don't know who your clientele is going to be or what's going to be there. But I firmly believe, knowing what I know in the other towns that you're in the cities that you're in, and the chairman is right, you are going to, the deeded stuff can be worked around to make these eventually affordable, and that's what's going to happen. And we have already met our limit. We already met our limit. So I'm asking you to please take a look at the overlay, start working with these neighbors, start working with these folks, and start presenting that project and make it work. Because there's other developers that were very interested in doing it. And they all think they can make it work. If they can make it work, I know you can make it work. Thank you. I appreciate it.
In effort to
Mr.
make
Chair,
this
may I-
move quickly, I ask,
Mr. Chair, may I just,
yes,
over here, may I just
certainly,
comment
sir.
briefly? Representative Soder, I really appreciate your time and your comments tonight, and I think, you know, we certainly have gained, and we are here, part of what we've been doing for the past several months is we are seeking to engage the community. We are not trying, we're not trying to loophole anything. We are not trying to do things in the shadows. That's why we're here, and clearly the 1,600 units was something that folks had an adverse reaction to, and so we're here to try to do better and continue to do better. I think the other thing is, you know, we know that nobody probably knows the intent and the intricacies of this overlay better than yourself. You know, it's clear you have a ton of institutional knowledge about it. You were chairman of the board at the time, select board at the time, and, you know, we would love the opportunity to meet with you and your input on this. And, you know, I know it's a busy time of year with budget season at the State House, but as you know, we've reached out to your office a handful of times. And, you know, maybe we should connect with your colleague on the way out tonight, but we would love the opportunity to sit down with you and have you, you know, we're not looking to sell you on anything, have you straight talk us on some of the intangibles that maybe aren't as obvious when you read the black and white.
I think I can straight talk. I don't know how many more times I have to do it.
Well, that's fair, but you're accusing us of not engaging, and we've been reaching out to your office, and no one responds to us. So it's just hard for us.
I'm going to answer that. I'm sorry. First of all, you don't elect me. They do. Okay? I answer to them, not to you. Okay? So I'm not engaging with you because this is public forum and we're having public discussion. I don't need to meet with you behind the scenes to have a conversation. I'll be happy to have a conversation. We can have it here. We can do it in public. I really don't care. But I'm not responsible to report back to you or get back to you. My aide has talked to me about meeting with you, and I will meet with the town officials. I'll meet with somebody from the planning board about this project, but I'm having that discussion here. I'm not going to have that discussion. Don't accuse me of not getting back to you. I'm more worried about getting back to them. I'm not worried about getting back to you.
So just, Mr. Chair, one thing.
Yes.
With the lapel mics that are on, just make sure that you try to talk as close to it as possible. I just raised them. Thank you.
Again, as we move forward, we want to rotate the questions, not discuss the same topic more than twice. If you want to make a statement, then get to your question. And lastly, to make the night go a little quicker, if you could hold off the applause until the questions, all the questions have been asked, then feel free to applaud. Who wants to be first? Gentleman here. Can you state your name, please, and address?
Greg Houghton, 27 Rome Ave. First of all, Andrew, how dare you say Mike not call back? He's the only elected official of mine that I've called who has personally called me back. And I think he just gave a great explanation right now why he hasn't called you back. I want to ask the board one thing, or tell the board one thing. NECC over here, whoever they are, they're not responding. I reached out to Bob with a basic traffic question by email and phone this morning, no response. I reached out to see if Rod Walkie will come and explain how we went from one developer to another, no response. And I kind of want to ask if Andrew asks or says the same thing to all the people he tries to sell this to. If you just Google what's been going on in these other towns that he's working in, one really stuck out to me that I want to share with you. He used the same analogy that he's been giving us about the innings. This is the first inning of a ball game. You're quoted in an article from the Boston Globe in January saying the exact same thing to a whole nother town. So you're just trying to sell us something we don't want.
That's really not the case, and I understand, your skepticism and cynicism, and, that's why we're here and making ourselves available to answer any of your questions.
Will you leave, and can we get a different developer is my question. When you were hired by Scape, previous company you worked for, you had a $1 billion investment in Boston to put in, 20,000 units or 40,000 units?
Honestly,
you're not the person we want.
I don't think this is the forum for personal attacks about.
And I agree.
Fair enough. So board members, please consider reaching out to Rod and having him find a new developer.
Excuse me, sir. One thing this board doesn't do, and people think we do, we don't approach developers. They come to the town. If we were to have Rob approach developers, it's not the right thing to do. The board will not be involved in that process. We're very transparent, and we have not rezoned any property or approached any developers to town since I've been on the board and prior to that. I appreciate your effort, but that's not what this board is here to do. That'd be more of an economic development board. Gentleman on the right.
Thank you.
Certainly.
Cody King, Glod Lane. I'd like to start with a statement and then kind of just follow up with a question. So this is still just a blatant monstrosity. Like, that is gigantic. I appreciate you guys trying to trim it down and move things around, but piggybacking off of what these other folks said here, it does not fit the community whatsoever. Like, it's an insult. It's a blatant insult to us. It's a blatant insult to us. It really is. And thank you. I'd like to follow that up with a question. The gentleman that's sitting to the right of Mr. Lucia, are you the representative from Woonsocket?
I am.
So I remember in the last meeting you guys had said that there would be no extension of Bound Road or Glod Lane. I was looking over the architectural diagrams, and it literally states that there is a legal need to have an extension of one of those roads as a maintenance road into this complex. What's your answer to that?
There has been no proposal to the city of Woonsocket for any such thing that you just stated, and it would be reviewed and likely denied.
Okay, I just wanted to make that clear because it is out there in their diagram. Thank you. Appreciate that. So the other question I wanted to ask you guys is, you ever tried to drive Payne Street in a snowstorm? It's not fun. It's not fun. You want to try and cram that many people over there? Good luck. good luck. And kind of piggybacking off of what Greg said, honestly, look into this guy's past, the other companies he's come from, it's all the same stuff, bait and switch.
I don't want a personal attack anymore.
You got it. I'll respect
Thank
that.
you.
Thank you. And that'll be it. Take care.
Thank you very much.
And just on that, on traffic regarding Payne Street, we will be having a meeting in a few weeks on that specifically.
On the left?
Fred Milgram, 703 Village Lane, 55 and older housing, 66 units. We live on a road very similar to either Rentham Road or Payne Street with 66 units, and it takes us anywhere from 5 seconds to 5 minutes to get out of our driveway. And when we get out of the driveway, we sit in traffic going in either direction, depending on the time of day. As far as safety goes, if the power goes out, power doesn't have to go out. We have at least 3 or 4 ambulance calls a month, and that's with 66 units. Most of our people are 75 to 80, and some are even older than, as old as 90 in there. We have a lot of health issues. How do you propose getting an ambulance in here and getting somebody down an elevator anywhere near as quick as you could take them out the front door of a single-family house, a single-family townhouse? It's almost impossible. The person could be dead by the time they get off your property. That does not make sense. An old lady goes shopping and gets 6 bags of groceries. She's got to walk out to a car in the winter and walk back and go up an elevator 2 times to get rid of her groceries. That is not common sense. This whole project, in my mind, and I've been in construction for 50 years, is absurd. Thank you.
Thank you. On my right, can you please state your name and address?
Yep, Carrie Mazzaro-Spaniff, 6 Acorn Street. Sorry. What impact is the development going to have on the neighborhoods off of Payne Road? I currently live off of Fairway Street. Fairway to Rome to Benelli to St. Louis Street is the most often used cut through to get off the light at Mendon Road on Diamond Hill. Traffic, it goes fast, they don't stop at stop signs, and they're not paying attention. So how is that going to be addressed?
That's something we'll be talking about in the June meeting.
Okay. What about the bus stops on Payne Street? I'm sure other people here have children. We're required to have our children stand on Payne Street every single morning and wait for the bus. You're adding 950 units to that side of this development. What are you going to do to protect the kids at the bus stop?
That's something we can review further.
Also, I think this is a ridiculous idea. I think it should be a requirement for the developers to drive Payne Street in torrential downpours like we had today, as well as blizzard conditions like the residents have to do. Then they would understand why their placement is not appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. Person on my left.
Marty Roach, 31 Crystal Way, Bellingham. Rob, first and foremost, thank you for doing the tallying sheet of all the concerns out of the last meeting and any phone calls. I did notice 2 things that one of them I had brought up and another person brought up, which is going to lead into another question for the applicant. But we spoke about blasting on the zone and what it would have to do with construction and that was brought up by a lot of people, and I think that should get added to that list just so it's there. And then one of the items I had brought up was the wetlands and the concerns of the wetlands. And again, I asked on the last meeting that the all the drawings and renderings have the wetlands on it with all the appropriate buffer footages on there, and I don't see it. Now we've moved buildings again, which brings me up even to more concerns of where are the wetlands in comparison to this, and when do you plan on meeting with Concom? Because I will be at that meeting.
So I think as Rob can attest and perhaps kind of direct folks to, the full submission included detailed wetlands plans with all of the buffers, and we are not impacting any of the wetland zones.
You just moved buildings. So with
But none of
buildings
them,
being
none of them
moved,
changed. So, but they,
until I see it, I'm
Okay.
from Missouri, the show me state. Show it to me.
all right, fair enough.
Now, points and the other to Rob, if you could take the town meeting that the overlay got approved and ask Channel 8 to edit it down to what was discussed on the overlay and exactly what the verbiage that was said within the town meeting and what was then approved upon in that town meeting, so that everybody here can go to the website, go into the folder that you're going to create, and be able to look at that.
Yeah, I don't know what ABMI's capabilities are for editing it, but we can certainly add a link to that video, and then in that link have the timestamp of this time, and this between these times is when discussion occurred.
If I can get the link, I'll get it edited.
Okay.
The other item now, this is basically items to the applicant. You moved 150 units from the east zone over to the west zone. So you've now just increased traffic on Payne Street by 18.75%. So your traffic study, when do you plan on redoing it? Because now all your numbers are totally null and void. And I would like to know when that's going to happen before the June meeting, because you're going to have all those numbers then, right?
That's correct. It's underway right now.
It is. Okay, can you tell me where on Payne Street each one of them markers are?
We will share the full report. I do not have the markers in front of me right now.
Okay. Going back to the blasting, each of these as a 55 and older is going to require elevators. Elevators, the machines rooms either go sub-basement or above the roof. And at a 5-story building, now you're talking, if you have to blast and you can't blast, then you got to go up. So now you're even putting a higher building. Or do you plan on taking the roof off?
The engineering has not been finalized. We have cited the buildings to minimize the blasting in areas where it's already sand and where there will be minimal blasting.
Okay.
To that point, Marty, as well, just to note with if you're putting mechanics on the top of the building, which would most likely include enclosure and facade, that would be included in the height calc, which means that it cannot be over the zoning requirement.
But then they're going to reduce their unit number if they have to put it up on the top. That's what I was bringing up. You can't go up because of the height restriction, so that means more units have to go away. So just bringing that up.
Fair enough. I'm just stating the zoning requirement is all.
I agree. Thank you. That's it for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you in June.
Gentleman on my right.
Mr. Chair, comment, Tim Rouse, 30 Jenks Street, comment and question.
Certainly.
First comment, the photos that you showed earlier of West Street, I found insulting and disingenuous, since the photos were taken not in the direction of where the buildings are. And so if you're looking to show a before and after and you're not showing the direction of the buildings, I find that to be quite disingenuous to this audience. Secondly, the question is, why, if the mayor of Woonsocket has come out and said publicly, love this idea, want this development, and I've already talked to I saw the water guys in the neighborhood the other day, already planning it out. So he says he's in the first inning, he's in the ninth. So they're already planning this stuff. They're moving ahead, they want to move ahead. Why isn't it coming out on the Diamond Hill Road if you want it so badly?
So, I mean, John, you can take this, but, just from...
Why isn't it coming out on Diamond Hill Road? There's a light there.
I can't answer that. This is the Bellingham
Well,
Planning
the
Board.
guy from Woonsocket can answer it.
Want to answer that?
Answer the question. Why, if you are so in favor of this, why don't you have it come out on Diamond Hill Road?
Again, there's been no presentation to the
There's no presentation,
Woonsocket.
but your mayor has already said that he wants it.
I don't believe that the mayor said that.
Okay, well, then you're calling me a liar, because I talked to the mayor. The
Okay.
mayor said that, and I can show it to you in writing.
How do I know what the mayor said to you?
Okay, well, you should, because you work for him.
Okay.
Sir, anything else?
Well, why isn't it going out on Diamond Hill Road? He won't answer it, so why don't you?
Just, we don't own the property that goes out to Diamond Hill.
You don't own the property that goes out to Rentham Road either.
We do.
Okay, that Rentham Road is a tiny road that cannot handle 200 cars, let alone 450. And Payne Road is no better. This is a disaster. It's an absolute disaster.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Gregory Duhamel. I live on Glow Lane in Woonsocket, Rhode Island. Just recently, I wrote a little pamphlet. I sent it to Robert and some of the planning board, as well as the historical commission. This pamphlet I put together is in collaboration with the Pocasset Wampanoag tribe of the Pokanoket Nation. The land that this project is slated to go on is sacred native lands. It goes back to Oshimiquan, the Chief Sachem of the Wampanoag. A descendant of the Wampanoag is here tonight. He edited my book before I submitted it and I released it. It's available on Kindle. It's for free. It's a gift to everybody, the world. We're trying to show and teach the history of the lands that is right there. There are native burials on that ground. There are indigenous sites also on that land. This needs to be preserved. An archaeologist or something needs to go out there before more pits are dug and more land is disturbed. You guys could be disturbing burials right now. You should be ashamed of yourselves.
On my left?
I don't live in Bellingham. I'm the vice chairman of the Pocasset Wampanoag tribe of the Pokanoket Nation. I'm here today to just take the information
Sir,
back.
can you move closer to the mic?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I don't live here in Bellingham. My name's Darrell Black Eagle Jameson. I'm the vice chairman of the Pocasset Wampanoag tribe of the Pokanoket Nation. I'm taking back information on what goes back here tonight. My biggest concern is what you're going to do to preserve the land that has our burial sites on it and was actually deeded to us back in 1661.
We are happy to review any information that is sent to the town. We have not received any of that.
Well, we'll be meeting then.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, would you mind if I just, Mr. Chair, mind if I just
Can you chime in here?
Yeah, that would be great. So first of all, Gregory, greatly appreciate you submitting that booklet. I know it went to the planning board. The plan is to also put that, since it's now part of the record, it'll be with our project information as well, so that way the developer can see it. I know you just sent it recently, but highly recommend. It's a very interesting read, so I appreciate you submitting that.
Thank you.
That's all, so.
Hi, my name is Bob Joliker. I live on Lake Street in Bellingham. I've lived in town about 55 years now. Excuse me. Everyone is concerned with Payne Street, and I empathize with those people. It's terrible. I've lived there all my life. I know many kids that have lost their life there. But you also got to remember one thing. If you egress more people onto Rentham Road, where are they going to go from there? Right down to Crooks's Corner. And if they don't go there, they're going to go on that little section of Lake Street that goes from Rentham over to Pulaski. No one even thinks about that. There's an area right in the center where the lakes are. It isn't wide enough for two vehicles to pass each other. They stop all the time. It's right in front of my home. And you go down a little farther, just before you get to Arcan Park, the road narrows down to nothing. and their tractor trailers that use it, and everybody's putting their brakes on because they don't fit now. And you want to take 1,000 more cars a day and jam them into Crooks's Corner and Lake Street. Now, another thing about Lake Street, that's going to be their only way to get to 495. They cut right across there and zip up Pulaski. That's going to cause more trouble in that area than you can imagine. You know, there shouldn't be more than expensive homes that go on a golf course. You don't need high rises and 1 million people. It should just be regular homes. But that's up to the owners. I have nothing to do with that. And my last concern is this. We don't have enough water to go a full summer, not even past the end of May, without a water ban. How are you going to supply all these homes? The center of Bellingham, you're building apartments like there's no tomorrow. And you've got more that are proposed on Mill Street in Bellingham that no one talks about. There's another 400 units supposed to go in there. Where are we going to get this water? You know, God only gives you so much. And this is only a small town. Take that into consideration when you think about doing what you want to do to this town. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Am I right?
Thank you. Jennifer Rousseau, 62 High Ridge Road in Bellingham, and Vice Chair of the Historical Commission. I wanted to first, just from a personal standpoint, just say going from 1,600 units to 1,400 units is not a big difference. It's not enough. You need to go way smaller than that. But from a historical perspective, I'd like to thank the two gentlemen behind me that spoke. We recently had been included in a dig, an archaeological dig that I believe was mandated by the state for another development that is going in Bellingham. They found things that were 8,000, 9,000 years old there. They found a hearth, they found arrowheads, they found carving tools, they found all kinds of things there. They did not find bones there. But there is a state organization that does this, that are assigned by the state, and I think that this is something that needs to be brought to that level, where people come in and very respectfully and carefully do digs that are very small, where they take care and they sift through things to determine what is actually there, ground penetrating radar, things like that. Because if you determine that there are burial grounds there and there are bones there, there are laws against building on that property. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may, just a quick question. That project that you were just referring to, you don't need to specify exactly which one it was, but was that one that was under subject of MIPA, so it was a state-mandated archaeological? Okay, so I think I know exactly which one it is. So, this is actually a pretty good segue just for some information. So when it comes to historic preservation with these projects, there's a few items to note, especially in Massachusetts, where there's specific regulations. Now, I know I appreciate anybody from the Historic Society coming along. We appreciate it. I know you guys do a lot of really good work in Bellingham, so thank you. And I know that there are certain regulations in town, but for the development projects, there's really two avenues where historic preservation really comes into play. The first one is through, it's actually federal, it's through the EPA, it's the NIPD's construction general permit, which NIPD's is National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. Basically what happens is if you disturb over an acre of land, you're required to submit a application to EPA, and you do something called a SWIP, or a Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan. As part of that, there is a requirement to get sign-off from the State Historic Commission. That one is probably the smaller hurdle. The second one, which is the much more in-depth one, which I imagine is what occurred for this other project, is MIPA. If people are not familiar with MIPA, MIPA is the Massachusetts Environmental Protection Act, and it does have specific thresholds which a large project like this, I imagine, would require a MIPA filing. That's with the state, it's not with the town. But with that, there are some very significant hurdles that the applicant has to go through. And the Historic Commission's review, the State Historic Commission's review of that is much more in depth, which is why I imagine this project that has met that MEPA threshold, there's a few in town, if they go through that review and there's an indication that there may be something on the site, they will have to do some pretty in-depth in-depth research, I guess you can say, to catalog and figure out if there are archaeological protected remains and such. So just to be clear, those are two items that I just wanted to mention.
Thank you. My right-hand side.
My name is Rick Campano, 70 Elbow Street. I have concerns about the cut-through Elbow Street from Payne Street, avoiding the corner. Also with the runoff of the water and the wetland water level, because I'm like the bottom of the hill. I mean,
I know.
And I'm really worried about getting flooded. So I just want to know what you guys are going to do about that. And the other thing is, I get all the noise from those buildings. I mean, you just added 150 more. I mean, I won't be able to open my windows back there. And I've lived there all my life. I own 2 properties on that street.
Thank you, sir. What I can tell you, and Rob alluded to it earlier, we're going to have specific meetings on specific topics, such as stormwater, public safety, traffic, as we move through this process. At the last meeting, I picked up on what the applicant said about a baseball game. I know it's referenced that Woonsocket may be in the 9th inning. I don't care about Woonsocket. No deference, sir. This is Bellingham. We're going to move this process slowly and listen to what you have to say.
Well, like I said, everybody's using Elbow Street for a cut-through now, and I
Yes.
can't imagine adding all those cars. You know that you ain't going to go to Crook's Corner. They're going to cut right through in front of my house.
I think we can discuss that when it comes to public safety and/or traffic.
All right.
I don't want to speak for those 2 departments, sir.
Okay.
But your comments are listened.
Mr.
to.
Chair, would you like me to just offer a little bit of clarity on the stormwater side?
Sure.
So, as the chair mentioned, there's going to be more in-depth discussion specifically about stormwater, because I know that there's going to be a lot of questions and concerns. There already are, but there's going to be more, I imagine, as people peel back the layers of the plans and look. Now, with that, regarding flooding and quality of wetlands, there's 2 pieces to this. On our side for the planning board, we will have a review of the stormwater report done by the applicant's engineer, and that needs to follow our local bylaws, but also the Massachusetts stormwater standards. The Massachusetts stormwater standards require that a development cannot increase in post-development flows off-site, so they cannot create flooding, and that there's a lot of modeling involved to make sure of that. It requires a pretty good exploration of current vegetation and soil conditions, because it has to be designed properly. So that's one item. And then the other item too is that there's requirements for treatment of stormwater runoff before it has what's called the outfall. So there needs to be pre-treatment, there needs to be treatment after pre-treatment, infiltration, all of these items. So that will be looked at. The other part of this is, which it hasn't been submitted yet to Conservation Commission, but what has been alluded to by, I think Marty mentioned it earlier. If you're within 100 feet of a wetlands and you're proposing work within 100 feet, that will require a filing with the Conservation Commission. They will most likely utilize our stormwater review and piggyback off of that to make sure that their standards are met, which are they're different but the same. They are governed under the Wetlands Protection Act, which has a pretty fair amount of carryover with the Massachusetts stormwater standards. But they will be required to review this once the applicant submits, if they have disturbances within 100 feet of the wetlands. So hopefully that clarity kind of helps a little bit.
Well, you're still dumping all that water goes into a detention. It's going in the ground. It's got to come out someplace. It just doesn't go to China.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, fair.
On my left-hand side, sir.
Good evening. Richard Picard here from Bound Road, Woonsocket, and also 0 Bound Road, Bellingham. Tax time is beautiful, you know. That and a bottle of Tylenol works wonders. But anyhow, I'm here to speak about water. First, we'll talk about stormwater for a few minutes. I believe today I might have seen the SS Minnow from Gilligan's Island go by the front of my house with all the drain water that's been going by, about 2 inches plus. So, as I said last meeting, an awful lot of water goes by my home. Second one was brought up earlier, is about drinking water. Seems to be an issue not only in Bellingham, but also in Woonsocket. A little history, years ago, when Diamond Hill was being constructed, blasting was done. In that particular area, there's a tremendous amount of ledge. And when the blasting was completed, there were several homes that lost their wells. Water was gone. The state had to compensate, and with working with the city of Woonsocket, they were able to get city water. Now, the rest of the tract that I live in all have wells, with the exception of 1 or 2 homes. I'm concerned about blasting on the Bellingham side. It'll come up to where I live. If I lose my well, who's going to supply the water? Do I come to Bellingham? Do I come to Woonsocket? So that's going to have to be an issue that may have to be addressed. Hopefully they can not blast and get the water that they need or find the water that they need. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, sir.
Hi.
Gentleman, am I right?
I'm Jessica Goldstein from Glod Lane in Woonsocket. I have a couple of questions. You said you were going to move the buffer back to 300 feet. Is that 300 feet to the parking lot, 300 feet to the building?
It's 300 feet to the building, and I believe 200 feet to the edge of the parking lot, which we've also reduced the size of based on feedback from last time.
Okay. And for Woonsocket, do we have an option to say no to the water and sewer if they want to tap into ours? And who makes that decision?
The current application does not have water from Woonsocket, and the sewer is being connected through the Bellingham sewer system, which we have an agreement with Woonsocket with specific capacities.
Okay. And I know Mr. King from Glod Lane also touched on whether they were going to extend Glod Lane or not, and you said probably not, but all of a sudden we're having a traffic study done on Glod Lane out of nowhere, so it's just very concerning. And I just want to know if so many people are opposed to this, including it sounds like some of the board. I'm not sure how this works, but how many times do they get to come back here, and do they just get to negate everything until there's a decision, or do you get to say no, or how does that work in the finality of it all?
What will happen, this will be a long process, and I made reference to the baseball game. We're going to have meetings on specific topics moving forward, related to that one specific topic. What we'll try to accomplish is that list, the PowerPoint, we will try to update that prior to every project. And I believe, Rob, can that be posted online?
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly note that on the agenda. Do you want, Mr. Chair, do you mind if I?
Go ahead.
Because I think, so
We have to get all the information.
Yeah, just
Right, understood.
Yeah, just some clarity on the process. So, because this is actually a great question. I know a few people have reached out to my office kind of asking, how does this work? Because it seems like we're just going to keep having meeting after meeting, and how does it end exactly? So, as you know, the applicant has submitted an application to the planning board. The planning board now has to review and act. Now, the applicant has the right to request that the public hearing gets closed and the planning board make a decision at any time. Now, it's in the applicant's best interest to address comments, concerns, and questions raised by the public and the approval authority being the planning board. So right now, we're in the process right now. That's part of the reason why I wanted to just document a lot of the questions and concerns that we have that are open. That way, it's on the record and we can kind of follow along. Now, with that, the planning board always goes through a peer review process to make sure that, because nobody on the planning board, at least not to speak ill of anybody up there, you're all wonderful, but nobody is necessarily an expert in traffic, engineering, and such. So making sure that we have a third-party consultant that's an expert in the field look at these things is important, as well as myself, to make sure that things are being reviewed and that they meet the standards. Now, with that, the applicant is most likely, the way that this works is the application, as concerns and questions arise, it changes a bit by bit as the process moves forward. The intent here, when we're going through the making sure that we hit each point, is trying to make the process go as smoothly and efficiently as possible, because we do have applications in front of us that they just seem to go on and on and on. We don't want that. We know that everybody here, you're sacrificing your time to come out because you're concerned about the project, and we greatly appreciate you all coming out to be a part of the process, because that's the only way any of these projects are going to benefit everybody. So with that, what I envision is probably going to happen, we'll be going through the peer review processes, and we're going to segment them to make sure that we're hitting each topic. I'm going to continue to keep putting information as we receive it on our website so people can actually see stuff before the meeting. And please, I know a lot of you, because as you've spoken, all of your names are ringing a bell based on conversations I've had with you in the past. Please do not hesitate to reach out in the process for any clarity, any questions. I know people have swung it by the office. It's been a pleasure meeting all of you. And please continue that dialogue. The intent here is to try and make this, as I said, go as efficiently as possible, and that we don't want to keep bringing everybody out for every single planning board meeting for the next year. That's why we're also trying to push the meetings apart, so that way the applicant has plenty of time to address items, so we actually have items to talk about during the meetings. Hopefully that it gives a little bit of clarity.
Thank you very much. I
Yeah, no
appreciate it.
problem.
Any other questions? Last question, gentleman here, coming. Two people.
Hi, Frank Mazzara, 6A Acorn Street, for the applicant. Have you guys done a study?
Sure, you have to direct things to the board.
Well, I have a question for the applicant.
Okay, just direct it to the board.
Okay. I want to find out if they did a survey of roughly how many people they expect occupancy in that 1,400 units. They expect a full 1,400 at the price. I'm retired and I can't afford $3,000, $4,000 a month for an apartment. And that's all that is apartments, okay? Second question, how many people are going to be allowed to live in the units? Is it going to be, can I bring my family in with me? My wife, my grandkids, and their grandkids? What's the limit going to be on that? Thank you. I'd like to have an answer.
Yes, something that we heard at the last meeting, and we've heard it again tonight, is more clarification on how we would enforce the 55 plus, which obviously is a legal standard, and there would be further accountability. So we're putting together all of those restrictions and certifications, and we'll share them with the group in the coming weeks. We have, yes. Well, I mean, there's a range of different, that'll tie into the different traffic counts and other things, so.
Thank you, sir. I believe the last question for the night.
Hi, Jeff Clowen. I live in Woonsocket, and I have to say that a couple of things have happened here tonight that have really my dandruff up. First of all, I feel like this representative from Woonsocket, I hope that this is gets some top view, because as a lifelong Woonsocket resident, I've lived off of Pinecrest Drive for almost 30 years, and our current situation with the sewer and the water is beyond insanity. And to think that we're going to, even consider bringing in 1,600 units into that unit, I hope that anyone that would even put their name on that dotted line understands that they will not service another term, because it's just insanity. The traffic, it's like we gloss over this. You bring up these pretty pictures. I don't think there's a person in this room who gives a crap what the buildings look like. We're worried about how it's going to impact this community. And the people in Woonsocket, I feel like this board here, I understand this project's going in Bellingham, but over the last 30 years, I now have to wait a half an hour to get out of Pinecrest Drive to get onto Diamond Hill Road to go to work. At 8 o'clock and at 5 o'clock, you're going to be bringing in between 1,500 and 3,000 cars that also are 55 and plus. They're still going to be working. They're going to be adding to that. I mean, it's just insanity. You don't need to be a traffic expert to understand that there's nothing that you can do with a 2-lane road, putting 3,000 more cars onto that road potentially at 8 a.m. and at 5 a.m. It's just going to be, it's insanity. I mean, drive at 8 o'clock or at 5 o'clock on that road. It literally takes you a half an hour to get from Payne Road to the 99 exit. Reduce the number of units that you're going to put in this place. It's just in complete insanity. And I just hope that the people, the representatives of Woonsocket here, there's a lot of people from Woonsocket here. This is going to impact us just as much as it's going to impact the people in Bellingham.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, Jill.
Can you speak up a little bit, ma'am?
Okay. Jill Clowen, 22 Pinecrest Drive in Woonsocket. There was a question as to whether the trees would obscure the buildings. And the answer was yes, they will obscure the buildings. But what obligation do the developers have to maintain any of those trees? Once this is built, can't they cut down all the trees? Like, what oversight or control does this board have over the aesthetics of that land? I guess that's what my question is.
I see you looking at me, Mr. Chair.
I certainly am.
So to answer that, so there's a requirement for the 50% open space requirement. Typically what will happen is when there's any type of open space calculation, in the decision it's that those open space areas are first of all to be maintained in perpetuity, and usually there's actually a deed associated with it. Okay. I don't know how this is exactly going to work out, because a lot of times it gets deeded to the Conservation Commission. In that case, there's no actual requirement for this, and I don't know if that necessarily would be the best option, but there are always procedures in place with the decision to make sure, because to your point, you don't want to have open space in perpetuity and it's all of a sudden just bladed. So with that as well, if for some reason there was a need to do something in the future with the open space, for example, like if there was a septic system upgrade or something, that would be required to come back in front of the planning board, because it would be an amendment to the special permit. So yeah, there is an obligation to maintain that open space.
Rob, I can touch on it too, just from a practical sense as well. In addition to commitments we would make, which I understand would need to be held accountable, but from a practical standpoint, we really are preserving all of the wetland areas, many of which include trees, and so those trees would never be removed from the wetland areas, which I think should give folks some comfort. But as Rob said, it's something that'll be further detailed.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, and thank you for coming.
Hi, my name is Linda Pino. I live at 8 Wakefield Circle in Bellingham. And I have a question regarding the various departments within Bellingham and whether they have had any input or any concerns, and have there been any meetings, and if there have been meetings, have they been open to the public where we can hear what the concerns have been from the DPW, the police, fire, emergency, so forth and so on?
Sure. So there have been discussions with the different departments. That really always happens with an application because there's information that the applicant usually needs to put on the plans. For example, you have to reach out to the DPW to get utility information. They are the ones who are the holders of the tie cards. Right. I know public safety has reviewed this, but obviously this is a living, breathing document, and we pretty much felt that there was going to be changes made after that first meeting based on the comments and concerns raised by the public. But I will tell you that we absolutely will have an actual commentary with each of the departments. What we like to do, typically the department head meetings are done usually during business hours, so they're not open to the public because it's hard to do a public posting and public hearing during the day. And we feel that we can get the information to the applicant and to each other pretty quickly. But we will have the department heads answer questions, and if they have any comments or concerns, to definitely raise them in the public hearing, because that's important. The whole idea of this public hearing process with an application is for transparency. So you will have every opportunity as well to ask the public safety, DPW, what have you, these questions. So what I envision is that when we start going through the actual topic. So for example, traffic is going to obviously impact public safety. We're going to want our safety officer here, who may or may not, I assume, is probably going to want to address the public at some point. That would be a pretty good avenue for them. But at that time, you have every right to ask them questions as well, because they are, public town staff. So.
Okay. So will there be, so will the meetings be posted so that if there was the opportunity for us to attend, that we could attend?
We wouldn't post the meetings with staff, no. Okay. We would generate our comments and then bring them to the public hearing.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I hope that answers your question, ma'am.
Yes and no, because
Please,
the reason I bring it up is that I'm kind of curious to know what the concerns are.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I'm sorry. So what I'm concerned or interested in is what concerns have we not brought up for various, whether it be traffic, police, fire, EMS. What concerns have they identified that we have not? And how serious are those? So I want to just be sure that we're thorough within this whole process, that we've covered every nook and cranny, everything.
Sure, and I can assure you that public safety, DPW, they will be here at the meetings, especially, when we talk about utilities and stormwater, DPW will absolutely be here. Even for traffic, it'll be good to have some representative from DPW. But with traffic, fire, and police will be here. And if you're familiar with some of the other applications that have been in front of the planning board, we do have a very development-centric minded department heads for both police and fire, which has been extremely beneficial for the town, because there's been numerous situations, numerous applications that there have been issues that have come up in the past that we really, as the planning board, we're not public safety experts, so these are issues that have been raised that, once again, it leads to the best outcome. So, yeah, to answer your question, absolutely, you will hear from Public Safety, DPW.
Okay.
I'm sure, Conservation's a little bit different. They're going to have a whole application process, too, that's the same as this. There'll be an open public hearing process for that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Charles Mitchell, Jenks Road, Cumberland, Rhode Island. And I'd just like to request that you expand your traffic studies to include Jenks Street that runs into Jenks Road in Cumberland. And it's a heavily traveled road, especially during commuting hours. And the addition to all this extra traffic that this development would produce will have a serious impact on a narrow road that's already inundated with traffic certain hours of the day. So if you would include that section of Massachusetts and Cumberland in your studies, that would be appreciated. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Paul Robinson, Pony Court in Bellingham.
Sir, can you speak into the microphone, please?
It's above the red. Oh, okay, sorry. Paul Robinson, Pony Court in Bellingham. My question is directed towards the board here. How concrete is this over 55? I, number one, cannot envision 1,400 units being occupied by over 55. I can envision, and I have read about other developments where they come back to the towns and ask that the over 55 be done away with because of rental problems. How concrete is over 55, and what is going to prevent this developer from coming back and saying, I need a change? In which case, talk to me about how many kids are going to be there going to our schools.
Rob, that goes to the bylaw.
Yeah, so the bylaw requires a 55 plus occupancy requirement. So the concern raised currently is how is that going to be enforced? That's the big question right now, which, the applicant really is going to have to come up with.
What's to prevent the applicant from changing?
I know, I'm about to answer that.
Okay.
So with that, the zoning allows 55 plus. The zoning does not allow this type of development that isn't 55 plus. So if they wanted to come back in front of the board, it actually would not be an amendment to the planning board. It would actually be relief that they would request from the Zoning Board of Appeals through the variance process. And if you're familiar with variances, or if you're not, they are extremely difficult to get because with the ZBA, with you're requesting relief from the regulation, you have to prove hardship, which that would be quite difficult for you folks to do. So
You have to prove hardship? Well, if the 1,400 units are only 75% occupied, there's hardship for you. How do we prevent this from changing to anything, as doing away with the over 55?
I believe I just answered. They would have to go through the variance process, and what you just referred to is a self-imposed hardship, which is not a hardship under the variance requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, sir. I think that will close the questions for this evening. I want to thank you all for coming. I want you to keep coming. But beforehand, I'd like to ask for additional comments from the board. Liz?
No other comments other than thank you for everybody coming tonight. Unfortunately, most applications are a lengthy process. We appreciate you taking the time to come out here.
My comments, I want to echo what you all said and what was outlined on the PowerPoints. And I anticipate that I hope the applicant is listening to everything you said and we'll work through these as we go on. And I don't mean to keep saying this. This is going to be a long process. As was said earlier, we're going to be very transparent. You'll hear from all the departments and stakeholders. And that is why you elected us, to look out for your best interests.
And I'd like to say stay involved, keep coming. It's going to be a long haul. This isn't the ninth inning for Bellingham. This is going to be a long process. I think we're going to have to discuss next when the next meeting is, but that's only a small portion of the concerns that were on the PowerPoint. So this is going to be going on for months and months and months, and please keep coming. I know it's difficult to give up your time as well, but please keep coming because it is going to be a longer than shorter time period that this project is, because it is a large project.
Stephen?
And just to piggyback on what Phil said, sometimes as these processes go along, the audience tends to thin out. That's the last thing that we want to see happen, because a lot of what we decide on has to do with your input. So not to be a broken record here, but stick with it because it's going to be important. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Rob, what's the next process here?
So I would recommend you make a motion to continue the public hearing to our second meeting in June, which is June 26th. We can discuss the traffic element, or start discussing the traffic element. And before anybody makes that motion, I would request, can we just after the motion, take a 5-minute recess to allow people to clear out. We do have other business to attend to. And also, just if you could, I know there's 2 Historic Commission people in the audience, if you can stick around really quick for 1 second, as well as Cody King, if you can stick around for 1 second after the meeting.
Rob, can I ask what we have from the applicant already as far as traffic is concerned, other than
So just this week, we received it's going to be posted tomorrow after this meeting, but just this week there was an addendum to the traffic study, which is going to go as part of the initial traffic study to the peer review consultant.
Do we have the scope of the peer review worked out yet? Or?
Not currently. We had the kickoff meeting with the peer reviewer this week, so they're going to be preparing that. We should see that within the next few days.
So it'd be good to have this meeting before we actually send it off to peer review. Or are you going to?
No, I would recommend we're going to move forward with the peer review. So.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you.
One last comment from the applicant. I'd like to remind you of the time frame for delivering reports to us, so the board has plenty of time to review it.
Yes, and thank you for bringing that to our attention.
I would entertain a motion.
I move to continue to June 26th at the high school.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Phil, aye.
Bill, aye.
Nick, aye.
That motion passes unanimously. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a brief break, after which we still have business to do. So if you could be as quiet as possible upon exiting, it would be appreciated. Thank you.